All right, we are live here for a pre-Thanksgiving, I guess, free-for-all stream. We're going to talk about music. Haven't really talked about music here before. I've got my good friends Alex, the Hebrew Hammer Salkin, and of course, Edoardo's back with us again. And really, Edoardo is the guy who's most relevant for this conversation because he is the bassist. Yeah, I think so. I think,
he's the legend musician here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you at least get paid to do it. I mean, I've been playing music from a young age, but I don't think I've ever made a single cent. So that's cool. So bassist for the band Nanowar of Steel. Going to encourage people to check that out. Eduardo, give us a little background of
Nanowar of Steel.
Yeah, do it for sure. Yeah, yeah. Like, how did this thing come about? Right? You guys are touring all over Europe. You guys are like the thing over there, right?
Not really, not yet, but we're confident we'll get to higher levels. But anyway, so this started as it was completely a sort of side project for me during the first years of university. Actually, I gave up on music when I joined. I mean, I studied physics, and so I thought it would have been too hard. Like when I moved from high school to college to university, I thought it would have been demanding, and so I said, okay, I have to give up on music. And so I had a band which I left, and so I started studying physics. And at some point I just said, it looks like I still have time for me left, so maybe I can keep on doing music. Mm-hmm. And so at some point I remember it was Christmas 2003, I guess. No, 2002 actually. So and I started recording some stuff during Christmas and Easter. No, sorry, not Easter. How do you call it? The 6th of January, Epiphany or something. It's like in Italy, it's called like that. But anyway, so it was basically Christmas holiday. So December, January 2002, 2003. And then I recorded, I had this idea. I mean, I was wondering why no one was taking a piece out of Manowar, because they're you might argue they're very good musicians and they do very good music, but still, I mean, it's something that you really can't take that seriously. I mean, but they do, and many people do, right? So I don't know how much you are into the metal scene, but for me, it was something unbelievable. Like grown-up men behaving like that and writing those kind of lyrics, and still saying that it's their attitude and it's something like taking that so seriously. And so I had to make fun of that, and that's how the thing started. I recorded a demo, and then from there I basically called back my old bandmates from high school times, and we made the band.
And now you guys have how many albums now?
This is a very weird question. I mean, it's not weird, but for us it's hard to answer because we had like some demos.
Sure.
We had a bunch of releases which are not completely like full-length albums, and then because we have a couple of releases which are basically half new songs and half were basically old songs from the first album or from the demos which were re-recorded. So like in terms like albums with full music, like of unreleased music, I would say it's like 4, but then we have like maybe 8 releases in total. We got an EP and other stuff like that, a live album.
Nice. Well, obviously that's going to be linked in the show notes so people can actually check out the music. Get ready. It's a comedy metal band.
It's comedy. If you take metal seriously, don't listen to us.
Yeah, no, or I take metal seriously, so I know Alex does too. I mean, when Alex and I are hanging out, that's pretty much all we listen to aside from my obnoxious homebrewed music. Alex was always like my sounding board for when I was writing tunes when he was out for a year.
Okay.
Yeah,
I made great.
Yeah, made him listen to it all the time on the way to the gym. Yeah. Let's start with this. This actually was a theme that came up. Just a fun question. I was talking with Jim the other day, and we were trying to. This would be a good one for the audience to chime in, and then we can start talking about. I'd like to focus on the skill side of it as well, the value in learning a musical instrument, how somebody can start to do so. I want to get there, but for now, Jim and I were trying to decide at least a couple of cover tunes that are decidedly better than the originals. And I think we agreed that almost nobody who covers Black Sabbath is better than Black Sabbath. However, almost anybody that covers Bob Dylan is better than Bob Dylan or something like that, right? I'm trying to figure out like where the asymmetries or something like that are. Yeah, Alex, why don't you go first, and then because I know you've thought about this before, and then I'd like to get Edoardo's thoughts. I've got 3 songs in mind I want to share, but I'm going to hold on to that for a minute.
Yeah, I would say Metallica does a very good job at covering stuff. So I would say "Whiskey in the Jar" is better than the Thin Lizzy version.
But Lizzie's was a cover too, right? That's just like
exactly. Well, it's a cover of an Irish drinking song, so it's like a cover of a cover. It's like it's like music Inception, basically. And let's see, that's the number one. I would say Johnny Cash.
Well, they covered that Seeger song, right?
Yeah, Turn the Page was also, I think, better than
Metallica,
the original.
right?
And the Seeger one's good. It's just not as good, I think.
Yeah.
Then Hurt by Johnny Cash. I would say it's at least on par with the Trent Reznor version.
See, I disagree strongly, man. I think Reznor's original, and people get that confused. They think Nine Inch Nails covered Cash. Right. It was the other way around. Cash was covering Nine Inch Nails. Yeah.
But that's why I say that I think it's on par. I can't say that I think it's better because it's just so much different. It's like, with, for example, Whiskey in the Jar. It's just a much more like raucous metal tune, and I think they did a much better job with it. But Johnny Cash's version is just a lot. It's like they're both desolate, and they're both supposed to, give you this feeling of desperation. So Hurt by Johnny Cash, as well as the original by Nine Inch Nails. They're like kind of like desolate and like depressing sounding for completely different reasons. So I would say it's as good. I used to think it was better, and now I think really it's just as good, but certainly not worse. So those are my 3 so far: the Bob Seger, Turn the Page by Metallica, Whiskey in the Jar, and Hurt by Johnny Cash. And I'm leaving others out there because I want to make sure that Pat and Edoardo, in case we overlap on something.
I wonder if there's a general rule with Metallica where I wonder if I'm willing to say that any song Metallica covers is better than the original band, but any Metallica song that is covered is better than Metallica's original.
Right. Well, okay. Well, I would say no, because they did a Merciful Fate medley, which was good, but I think Merciful Fate, like all of their originals, were better than.
I don't know if I've heard. I don't think I've heard that one, so I can't speak to it yet. Edoardo, how about you?
Well, first of all, talking about Metallica, I don't know if you listen to the Black album. There's the Blacklist. I forgot what was his name. There's like this bonus for the 30-year release of the Black album. They just released it a couple of months ago, and there's a bunch of people. I think there's Lady Gaga on it. There's basically everyone they could get from the pop scene, from the rock scene. There's Ghost. There's really pretty much everyone.
I remember actually, this is probably not the same thing that you're talking about, but I do remember a number of years ago, there was some like tribute to Metallica. I think it was maybe around the time Saint Anger came out, and they had a bunch of people doing like Metallica covers, and Avril Lavigne did Fuel, and evidently just it sucked.
I'm gonna have to retract my previous rule then. It's just knowing that.
No, you should listen to this. I think there's like 50 tracks. So there's the full Black album by Metallica, which was covered by, I don't know, maybe 60 different artists. I don't know. There's a huge tracks playlist on Spotify for that. I mean, you can buy the original album. I didn't dare. I mean, I like the Black album. I think it's a great album. But no, not as so much as buying a second copy with this bonus CD, because it's
right.
And I mean, if you listen to this bonus CD, like, frankly, I think it's horrible. It's really horrible. I cannot listen to it. I mean, even, for example, bands like Ghost, which I usually like a lot, I really listen. And I don't have any prejudice, I would say, against any other kind of, pop style, rock style. It's not because of that. It's just that you listen to these songs and they're not adding anything to the originals. And they are not even, there's like interpretation. I mean, maybe there's a couple of, I think there was Elton John singing on Nothing Else Matters, or playing the piano. I don't remember, actually. There's really a bunch of huge names playing there. But I didn't really feel this like it was adding something to the music, beside the fact that you have some huge name singing some other song. It was
just kind of a gimmick rather than a well done cover, right?
Yeah, that was my impression. I mean, I didn't dare to listen to that. I mean, I remember we were on tour with Nanowar. and we put that like was basically the soundtrack for a couple of hours during our journey, and then we had enough. Like we had to skip half of the track. It was really unlistenable for us. It's
I mean, yeah. When it comes to gimmicky stuff like that, I think that's right. I mean, I hold some, I guess, controversial views on Metallica. Anyways, I actually like '90s Metallica better than '80s Metallica, which is pretty like you'll get people turning their noses up at that. But I think I have good reason for that. One is that like once you get like really into metal and prog metal, like old Metallica doesn't hold up that well. Like once you start listening to like Dream Theater, these other guys, like Metallica just seems kind of clunky and slow. Old Metallica, right?
I don't agree. But
no, push back, please. This is not the agreement cast. But 90s Metallica, right, when they kind of slowed things down a bit and got funky and groovy, and I'm talking not just Black, but like Load and Reload, which people don't like that much. I actually really love those albums. Songs like now they're escaping me because it's been a while, but
Ain't My Bitch.
That's a great one. But I'm
Fuel.
thinking,
I mean, no, I like the two albums, to be honest. I like that. I mean, what you said is like the funk tune and then the groove.
Yeah, but there's two in particular. I cannot remember them.
The House that Jack built, or how about Outlaw Torn?
That's the one, Outlaw Torn. That is a phenomenal tune. Right?
Yeah, that is excellent.
Right, and yeah, I mean, like, look, Injustice for All is still cool. I mean, but I mean, like, it was badly produced. Like, you can't even hear the bass, right? I mean, it's just like it's
basically not there.
Right. Yeah. It's just like you might as well not even had a bass player on the album. Right. Yeah. Plus, I think Megadeth is just like schools Metallica up and down, which is another controversial thing. Like if I take like 80s Megadeth versus 80s Metallica, I'll take almost 80s Megadeth any day in terms of the actual music and musicianship. But Edoardo doesn't agree.
No.
And most people don't. I'm in a minority position.
I know.
I admit it.
I mean, it's a matter of taste. And like as far as I'm concerned, so first of all, I don't know if you want to close the parenthesis with this
cover songs. Yeah, let's do it.
I had one thing to say because I'm not that much into cover songs. I agree with what Alex just said about Metallica's covers, which are usually they're very good, and they did a very nice job on Garage Inc. and all the others they released throughout their career.
Yeah.
I have I don't know. I know. I mean, there is one cover that I really like. It's not exactly a cover. I don't know if you know it's the version of "The Sound of Silence" by Nevermore.
I haven't
heard the band Nevermore. Nevermore.
I do know the band. I haven't heard that cover though.
I mean,
wasn't Jeff
the same
Loomis?
Lyrics.
Wasn't Jeff Loomis their guitarist?
Yes,
for a while?
on the guitar.
Right,
Yes.
Tremendous
and,
player. Right.
Yes. And the singer died. I remember he died in Brazil after a show like 3-4 years ago. I forgot his name. I was a huge fan, a massive fan of Nevermore. I mean, they're technical and groovy, and I mean they simply kick ass. And this song is like they rewrote completely the music, and they just adapted the lyrics of "The Sound of Silence" to the new music. And you should listen to it. It's incredible.
All right, so that's going to be Edoardo's recommendation.
And there's and I just like the guitar so much. I mean, Jeff Loomis.
I love Loomis, so I'm gonna check that out right away.
He's yeah.
I want
to. He has a cover of Jason Becker's. I forget my brain is not working today, but Jason Becker, you know who I'm talking about?
Yeah, sure.
Guitarist who was a virtuoso in the 80s, got Lou Gehrig's disease, still alive, but just tremendous like young virtuoso. He had an album, and he's got a song that is just amazingly just like a beautiful song that's almost just completely ridiculous sweep pecking arpeggios, right? It's like how you could do that for an entire song boggles the mind, but he did. Loomis covered that beautifully. It's somewhere on YouTube, so that's worth checking out too. I would say, as far as just to finish this off, if there's one cover song that I think beats the original, it's worth listening to as well. The song "Cats in the Cradle." Most people know that song, right? But there is an obscure 90s band called Ugly Kid Joe. Remember this? Alex, you know what song I'm talking about?
Yeah.
They cover that song, and they killed it, man. Their rendition of that is incredible. So "Cats in the Cradle" by Ugly Kid Joe. I don't even really like the original that much. I think but the cover's very good.
Before we move on to whatever the next topic is, I think we have to have a couple of honorary mentions about some other really good cover songs that I like.
Do it.
I don't know if anybody here actually likes Typo Negative, or if I'm the only person who does.
Not so much, but
Haven't listened to him that much. Yeah.
Okay, so there you go. But they have some great covers, like Cinnamon Girl. They covered, but from who was it? Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, Cinnamon Girl, Summer Breeze from Seals and Croft. Like they would cover songs that were not like metal songs, and they would turn them into this like doom metal. And it was just great. I always liked it. And then I was going to say, in terms of Black Sabbath covers, this is almost doesn't really count, but it kind of does, because I think that the Primus with Ozzy version of NIB is actually better than the original. But Ozzy's singing, so it's just a different like backing band. But I think that version is.
It's like when Ozzy's playing Sabbath with Zakk Wylde. Like
yeah.
Does that really count, right? But I love Zakk Wylde too. So in fact, Zakk Wylde's covers are usually quite good when he does covers. Edoardo, how long did you start on bass, or what was your starting instrument? And you play more than bass, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a really good musician, to be honest. So I started with the guitar, and then I moved to bass because when the band formed, at some point we needed a bass player, and I'd say, okay, I'll just move to bass. And like I never really studied bass. To be honest, I started in the last couple of years. I started studying it. I mean, I remember during the first lockdown in Italy, I started watching some videos on YouTube to how to actually play the bass, like not as a guitar player, but as an actual bass player. So that's right. I never did it before. It's like I was just good enough to barely to play the stuff I had to play with band.
That's funny you mentioned that, because growing up, like I started young. I did all my music theory, right? Took my AP music theory courses in high school and all that too. And then like I was so shocked to learn that like the musicians I really looked up to and admired, a lot of the shred guitarists in like the 80s, people like Paul Gilbert, right? That they knew very little music theory. Right? Like a lot of these guitarists, like some of them knew none, like, just think of your mainstream rock guitarists. Like, so like it made me question, like, well, what was the point of learning all this stuff? Right. I remember like the first time Paul Gilbert, I was watching one of his instructional videos, and he's like, yeah, I don't read music. I just kind of, or Marty Friedman from Megadeth. He's like, yeah, I don't know scales and modes. I just make it up. I'm like, what? I could have been doing that. Right. He's like, I listen to Japanese enka music. Right. And and now who knows if that's true, right? Maybe he secretly knows a lot more than he's admitting. But it was like one of those like big moments for me where, I spent a fair amount of time, thinking like this was really necessary for me to just be what I wanted to be, which was like a rock guitarist. And we see how that's panned out, right? But looking back, like I am glad, that I guess I have that background. Are you studying much theory now, Edoardo, or what have you been like trying to?
No, I mean, like I said, as I said, I studied something like just to catch up on theory, and at the moment I'm just practicing like mostly technique and how to play smoothly, and I'm actually not even that. I mean, I'm enjoying it. Like for the many years I wasn't living in my home, so I was living abroad, right? So I never got all my instruments with me, so I didn't even have the chance to practice. I mean, I had maybe a guitar and that's it. I wasn't like moving around with bass and amplifiers and all the stuff. No, I got everything here, and of course, like if I got a couple of electric guitars, if I can play them with an amplifier and like with proper sound, of course, it's like much more satisfying than actually playing maybe an acoustic guitar somewhere else. So it's by the way, I mean, yesterday I had like my first gig outside of Nanowar in the last, I don't know how many years. I was playing some Balkanic music. So the last month I was basically practicing that kind of style. It's and playing a bunch of Balkanic songs. So it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Metallica.
Hold on one second.
It's like I was playing Serbian songs mostly, Serbian, Yugoslavian songs. So from
what, like, but on bass or on a different instrument?
No, on a guitar. I was playing the acoustic guitar.
Right on.
Where are you gigging around these days, Alex?
Nowhere actually. And my excuse for not playing, I also play bass for those who are not familiar. I've had the bass that I have since like 2003, and I've never replaced anything on it other than the strings and the screw that screws in to the bottom so that you can attach the shoulder strap. It fell out, and it's just like, well, why bother playing? So I really, it's a terrible excuse. I really do need to get it fixed. I don't think it's going to be that tough, but for that reason, I haven't done much. And then
well, you're a good player though. And did you like did you have
lessons?
formal lessons and stuff growing up, or yeah?
Yeah, I did actually. So the story behind my learning bass is kind of interesting because my brother, well, I don't even know how, because my brother's younger than me and I was like 15. So that would have been, he was like 11. He managed to order this off the internet in 2003, which was like, you needed like a credit card and like the president's approval. And it was not like ordering things off of, the internet today, but he ordered like a cheap bass guitar and he would play around with it a little bit, but he kind of lost interest. And so eventually I would play it a lot, like go into his room and I would like jam on it. And so eventually I just bought it from him. And I would just learn songs that I liked, and it got pretty good. In fact, I remember one of my big projects back in high school was that I learned Anesthesia on bass by Metallica. And there is an old video.
Is that the equivalent of Eruption on the guitar?
It's like,
I take it,
exactly. It's like exactly, yeah. It's like Eruption.
This is just a rite of passage, right? You just have
correct. I guess. I mean, I haven't met too many other people who've on bass who've played it. I think largely because they pride themselves in being bad musicians, as Edoardo was talking about. Yeah, so at that point I was decent enough, and my dad was like, "Well, why don't I get you some, bass lessons so that you can improve your skills even more?" And so I took maybe about a year and a half or 2 years worth of bass lessons. In fact, actually, at one point I was taking lessons from the bassist for Rat with Stephen Pearcy.
That's hilarious.
Here in Omaha. Now, it's not Rat with Stephen Pearcy. I just want to clarify. He was the lead singer for Rat, and then they kicked him out, and he started Rat with Stephen Pearcy, which was the name of the band. And his bass player.
Before or after the song Round and Round?
It was after.
That was after, okay.
But the bass player was that I didn't take a lot of lessons with him, but he was phenomenal. And the guy that I had before was actually technically a guitarist, but he was really good with music theory. And so he was able to help me with my bass quite a bit. So, yeah, I did have some formal lessons, and I think it really helped me to move on to the next level. It's kind of like we were talking in a previous stream, Pat, about the importance of having an instructor, or getting coaching. And so, yeah, for me, it definitely made all the difference. But I just have not been as I haven't been as regular about my playing in like the last 15 years. So it's fair to say that even though I'm pretty good still, I'm not godlike like I once was. So,
well, it's like any other skill, right? It's a sticky skill. So, I mean, it'll come back fairly quickly. But at the same time, I mean, that's a funny thing about skills, right? Is I think the guitar is a good thing like this. There are some aspects of guitar playing where if I don't do it every day, I lose it very quickly, like sweep picking, for example, right? It's just such a finely tuned, and maybe people are better than I am, but like if that's a skill, like if I don't keep at that very often, it goes away very quickly, or it gets sloppy very quickly, right? The real technical stuff. But like I could not play guitar for probably 5 years and come back and pick up a guitar and probably do a halfway decent AC/DC tune. You know what I mean? So there's some elements of the skill that are like riding a bike. And like, that's true in life in general, right? I mean, we talk about fitness. Like if you have like high level performance at a lift and you don't keep at that, you're going to drop off the high level pretty quickly, but you'll still maintain, even if you get pretty lazy with your fitness routine, a lot of the base that you built up, right? Edoardo, what are your thoughts on that?
About keeping the level despite the lack of exercise, because my thing is that I never really got to a very high level with bass, and now I'm practicing fairly often, like not in absolute terms, but for my schedule. So it's much more than I used to for the last 15 years, just like Alex mentioned. I mean, I was playing before. I was just playing before the shows and like a couple of days before that, and warming up with the band. And
But you know, I
but I
also
guess
think,
it's like for the things I have to do, it's that was more than enough.
Right, and that's a great point, right? About and I should take that. I mean, that's sort of one of the themes in this obnoxious book of mine, is that like you don't have to like get the high level stuff down to do like most of what you would need or want to do as a musician, right? Like
Absolutely.
you just don't. And in fact, in some ways it might be better to ignore the depth and kind of go for breadth. And that was kind of what inspired this. I mean, in high school, like I was so obsessed with the high level stuff because of the people that influenced me as a musician, like the Steve Vais and the Joe Satriani's, who I was never anywhere close to being as good as, right? Those guys were in many ways just like genetic freaks. I mean, just their finger length was like crazy, right? But nobody cared, right? Nobody cared. Like at least in my high school, right? What they cared about was the guy who could like kind of play a couple chords and hum the Dave Matthews tune, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I was sad in high school.
I think in general, this is we already discussed this back then, but I would say like number one enemy of perfection. Like that's the most dangerous thing that you should strive for in your life. Like, and like musicians all very often do this error, I guess. Like I know a lot of very good musicians in the scene, and I mean wherever I've been and wherever I played and wherever I lived, but. And then you notice that they spend much more time, for example, on their skills rather than, for example, working on marketing their skills.
Yep.
Which, like, spending 2 hours more on the guitar will get you maybe, I don't know, like the marginal advantage that you can get. It's basically nothing. But if you spend those 2 hours maybe on like doing YouTube videos or social media promotion or any other thing like that, then it would it might be just a much better investment in your skills as well, because you got more motivation, you get more money. I mean, you can get some sort of reward, and this is something that musicians really fail to understand so often. I would say it's in my experience, there's maybe it's a general thing of human nature. I don't know, but I tend to notice it more from like among artists, like people that consider themselves artists, that they say, "Oh, I'm an artist. I have to work on my skill." And like I don't do those other things. Like, of course, not everyone, but there's just so many that do that, and
they're so pure.
Well, I can tell you for sure. Pat can probably also back me up on this. It's the same thing in the world of exercise and like personal training. I've known plenty of very, very talented trainers who were like, like I don't want to market. I think, do any marketing. I think that's a little bit, beneath me. Like I'm not trying to hard sell anybody, whatever. So they have excuses for why they're not doing much to actually help people. And, it's slightly different with music, maybe because it's not about, their health or their fitness, but it is about their enjoyment. And people place a really high priority on entertainment. It's why people carry their phones around with them everywhere. Where people aren't going around, reading textbooks. They're reading, like the tabloids. They're not listening to lectures. They're listening to music, or they're listening to any other number of different things. So yeah, I agree. I think that the same thing goes with musicians as goes with a lot of other fields that require that you be very, very passionate about something.
And not just that. I mean, this was something that my guitar instructor was both my guitar instructor I had for most years growing up was good about, but not like good enough, right? Because he always emphasized to me, like, Pat, you can't just keep doing the fast metal stuff. Like, you got to learn the jazz, you got to learn the country. Like, he was good at emphasizing I needed to be a generalist, and I'm happy for that, because it forced me to learn stuff that would later, I think, just make me a better player overall. However, he never like got outside of musicianship in general. He never said, Pat, you got to learn marketing. Pat, you got to learn how to be a better performer on stage, or you see what I'm saying? So like he kind of got it, but didn't go far enough with all that stuff. And you're right, Edoardo, you're spot on, right? It's just like, okay, there's some marginal utility that you can get as a musician practicing 8 hours a day instead of 6. Granted, right? whatever that is. Probably not a whole lot, right? But if you spent those extra 2 hours, working on, I don't know, some gimmick on the stage, right? Right. I mean, take Kiss. Kiss is a great example, right? Has anybody thought that any of the members of Kiss are the best musicians of all time?
No.
Has anybody ever thought that? Right?
AC/DC. I mean, there's like so many examples you can.
Right, but like, why have they been famous? Well, because they're like interesting in different ways, right? And whether then like the question is like, did they know that or not? I think Kiss did. I think Gene Simmons is actually a pretty smart marketer, from what I understand. I don't know if AC/DC did or not. Like, I think they were just being goofy with Angus Young, and it just worked, right, by chance, the schoolboy outfit and all that. But the point is like, Angus is famous not because he's as good as Steve Vai. He's clearly not, right? Although he'll often get mentioned on like top 100 guitarist lists, and Steve Vai isn't on there, which is obviously idiotic, right? And sometimes Angus will be like number 10 or something like Angus is a fine player. He's not bad, right? He's a good like general rock blues guy. But the reason he's so famous is because AC/DC was really different in many ways, right? And they had
he was influential. I mean, that's the thing that you need to keep him. I mean, that's not something you can learn, I guess, but there's just so many things you can at least try to improve. And I mean, of course, we're always talking about like the top 0.01%, right? AC/DC and Kiss, but like you can make a decent living out of music, or you can like have some kind of success even without being Kiss, right? Without reaching those levels. And so that's where, I mean, you should be like keep yourself within the boundaries of reality when people when you think about music, because people very often think it's like a binary system. It's like, I either want to get everything or nothing. So I'm aiming for the top, and so somehow I'll become the best, and just out of magic I'll go. And again, this is what I see like when I interacting with other fellow musicians in the scene. But if you want to be realist, then you should see, okay, what can I do slightly better than, I don't know, 50% of the people? And how can I make the public believe that I'm doing it actually better than, say, 70 or 80%? Because of the way you sell yourself. Because this is something I notice in academia as well, that there's many people that they get to the top layers they become professors, or they go, they can... They manage to move forward with their career and get top positions. And it's not like they're best scientists I've ever met, but they're very good communicators. They know, there's a lot of other side.
There's a game that they know how to play, right?
There's many other things that you need to judge the skill of how good of a scientist you are, how good of a communicator you are, how can you organize a research group. It's not exactly the same. Are you a good professor or not? Can you keep the students entertained, and so on and so forth? So this is a general rule. Again, it's you read it in your book. So
it is a general rule, isn't it? And you're right. There's a great marketing article actually written by a musician called 1,000 True Fans. And I don't know if you've read this, Edoardo, but I encourage everybody to read it. And his whole argument is like, look, you don't have to worry about being Kiss, right? He's like, all you need to make a good living as a musician, like a 6-figure living, is just get 1,000 true fans. And by true fans, like people that will generally buy any new thing you put out, whether it's merch or an album. He's like, and that's a very realistic goal. Like, you can do that, right? Yeah. And I would say it's a brilliant article for anybody, not just musicians, from a marketing standpoint. And I didn't want to talk about that general rule because you're right. I mean, I think about anything that I've like been passionate about or know something about, the best often aren't the most popular, right? Or the most made, right? Almost never, right? In academia, right? Like the best thinkers I know, probably not the most famous. I mean, occasionally you might get a little crossover. The best musicians that I can think of, like the best, are people, if I listed their names who I thought they were the best musicians now, most people probably would never have heard them, right? It's not to say that the ones who have had it made are necessarily bad. I mean, I think some of them are. I think some of them are straight up bad, right? Just like I think some people in academia are straight up dumb, right?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Well, right. But they can't be like completely dumb. They had to get something right? It's something about the game. That is a general rule. What do you think about that, Alex? You agree with that rule?
100%. Because I mean, you think about, I think the music topic is probably the one where that's most obvious. You brought up Angus Young, but we can think of even
Hey
more.
man,
like,
don't beat up on Angus too
no,
much.
I'm not saying
I got my SG right here.
I see that. No, but I'm not saying he's even bad. I'm saying he's just he's adequate for sure, and he's influential and he's memorable. But like there are even more egregious examples. Like you look at the Sex Pistols; they were all terrible musicians, but their album is great, and it was their one album that they ever put out. Or the Ramones. Like I think who was that? Was it
Or
Ramone?
Nirvana, right? I mean, like punk is
Yeah.
like notoriously poor musicianship, but you're right. Sometimes things like come together and it kind of works, right?
Yeah, well, and you know what? It's like the list could go on. The Misfits, you know, like they play like 3 chords, you know, just over and over again. But it's great to listen to them. So, and they have all these bands have like lifelong fans, and people really like them a lot. Whereas, yeah, I mean, I remember you telling me a story about a guy who he would play like concerts at like bars or whatever, like on the acoustic guitar, and you said he was just like unbelievable, but he had 0 people skills, was like completely like
I'm not going to mention his name, but one of the best musicians I ever met, classical guitarist. He's actually got a decent little YouTube following, but the man was like hilariously rude to his fans, which like actually makes me wonder like why didn't he take off? Because like I thought it was like hilarious, but like it wasn't intentional. Like he's just so socially awkward.
Yeah,
but you're right. Like this man was probably the best musician I've ever seen, and he can't even get 20 people to show up to a show. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so that's a great example of Dan Kennedy, the marketer, likes to say, if you try to basically do what you see a lot of other people doing, you might end up getting to the top of the bottom. And you do not want to put yourself in a position like that. Like, these are people who, if they decide to stick with music, are never going to make an impressive income. They're always going to be struggling artists because they won't do the things that are going to help them get out there a lot more, even if it's slightly uncomfortable. So whether it's marketing or what have you, like it doesn't matter how good you are if no one hears you. So, I think it's a mistake, regardless of what your passion-based career is, whether it's personal training or music or acting or anything like that. You've got to be able to sell yourself and put yourself out there, and that's a skill that you can learn. But being the best is oftentimes subjective, and may leave you alone and penniless.
Indeed, yeah. Let's talk a little bit as we wrap up here about so maybe somebody's listening and they say, Alex, Edoardo, you guys have inspired me so much. I just want to be a musician like you.
Very tasteful and intelligent person, I might add.
Handsome as well, and just everything about you. I just want to be that, right? But I've never picked up an instrument before.
This is like a single white female sort of a situation. I was in that movie.
Right. How do I do it? How do I start? And I want to get your guys' advice first because, I taught like guitar lessons in high school and stuff like that. But the way I would advise people now is totally different than like, when I was in high school, I'd be like, all right, we're going to learn all 30 keys and we're going to practice our playing in all 30 keys. And like, that's definitely not what I would advise now. But I want to get your guys' thoughts first for all those people out there who are just waiting for their musical career to happen, but they don't have any experience on an instrument. How can they get started? What are some good tips?
Edoardo, you should go first because you're the one who's actually making a career as a musician, and so I'm still circling the bottom.
Oh, we have Alex on here. It's the guy who never even had the chance to be a has-been giving music advice.
I'm a never was,
but neither am I. I was a never was either.
So first of all, I think it's more about it's like everything. You have to have a goal. So when you want to learn something, you have to ask yourself, why do I want to learn this? And what's your goal? What do you want to achieve with that? And that has to be pretty clear. And it's the same, again, this is my method. So again, I'm biased towards myself, but I can say that it sort of worked in the other fields where I can claim some kind of success as languages or, science and, like, for example, programming now. I'm a programmer and data scientist and whatever. So again, every time I had to face a new technology or I need to learn a new language, the first thing, okay, what do I use it for? So before even reading the manuals, and because the usual thing with music theory, like with music, it would be theory. With maybe with languages would be the grammar and so on, right? So you want to understand the basics, but again, it has to be very practical. So you need to have a goal and you need to be motivated towards that goal. Otherwise, it's completely useless, because you can like spend 3 months learning something, and then all of a sudden you say, "Oh, I'm fed up with it. I'm bored. I don't want to do this anymore." And that's what happens most of the time when people learn some new skills. So with music is exactly the same thing. So you want to, even if you say, "Oh, I want to just start a Beatles cover band," that's fine, great, okay. So you need to learn, but it's a practical goal. So you need exactly what you need to do, and you can sort of plan the steps to get there. Another thing is like, "Oh, I want to be the best metal band ever." So it's a completely abstract concept, right? So it's pointless. Like to start with that, and then at some point you might find that you learn an instrument, you might find you're pretty good at it, and then you might get some inspiration, and then things move by themselves, right? Once you get the skills and you understand enough, both from a theoretical and a practical point of view, then you can move on, and you don't need a guide. I mean, you can just create things for yourself, or just use the tools that you learned. But again, I think in general the most important thing is to have a practical goal in mind, at least for the first steps, and have to and keep it very practical and very honest. Like, if you don't like it, then maybe it's not the thing you have to do. There's no point in like studying something for 3 months and not achieving anything and forgetting all. You basically just wasted your time.
Right. Yeah, that's good. Like, get honest with yourself. If this isn't what you want to do, then don't bother.
Yeah.
I think you're spot on about that. Yeah, I would say all that, and one, like, get a good couple lessons, just so you don't build bad habits from the start. That's always a good lesson.
Sure. Yeah.
I was talking with Alex before, like, when I first started playing guitar, I used to hold the pick. I don't know if people can see this, with like a ton of fingers on the pick, right? And immediately my instructor corrected me. He's like, you're never gonna be able to play fast with that, right? What you need, for anyone who sees it, is like, you need minimal finger on the pick, right? If you really want to be able to play fast, right? And that was fortunate, because he told me at the time, he's like, "Look, we're glad we caught this now, because if you would have went years for this, not only would you have to learn the right technique, but now you have to undo all the bad technique, right?" So, as a piece of advice, whatever else you try to do, try not to build bad habits right away, right? And the only way go ahead.
It's good to have an instructor. Sorry, it's that's something I forgot to mention. But I mean, of course, having a goal, it's the motivation. But then you need someone that tells you right from the start which mistakes you can avoid and spare a lot of time.
But, but to your point, I would say, like, okay, like, maybe get your circle of fifths down, but I wouldn't even worry about that much. Like, if like you're really pumped up to learn an AC/DC song, take that to your instructor and be like, "I just want to learn this AC/DC song," and then you'll just learn the techniques and the riffs and the licks that you need just to learn that AC/DC song, and that's fine. Like, you're gonna have to learn basic techniques to learn an AC/DC song, basic techniques of strumming, basic chords. Bend, vibrato, all that stuff, right? Pentatonic, at least, blues for AC/DC. So you'll get, like, honestly, if you just focus on AC/DC songs, I know we've been making fun of AC/DC a lot, but if you just focused on like learning like 4 AC/DC songs and just like really nailing those, you would learn some pretty good fundamental techniques. And then what you got to do is you just got to like learn to isolate it, right? And so it's like, you're not going to get the whole song at once. And you might spend a lot of time, it's very slow at first, like just learning to hold the pick and hit that first E5 chord or whatever, right? So what? Do that. But because what Edoardo said, because it's attached to a goal, like when you get the first time you hear yourself kind of playing an AC/DC riff, that's going to pump you up in a way that just playing your C major scale never is going to, right? Like, nobody gets pumped up the first time they play a C major scale. It's just nothing to get excited for there. But the first time I kind of sounded a little bit like Led Zeppelin, man, like, I never stopped. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I guess, Alex, my concern is the same thing with languages, right? The first time you have a conversation in a language you're learning, it's like, oh wow, it's working, it's magic.
Yeah,
and this is the kind of concrete steps you need to have in mind, because it's if you learn a language, then what do you want to do? Okay, I'm fine with just ordering food at the restaurant. Cool, okay, it's a fair level, but you still need to get it to that level, right? And once you do that, you see, wow, I achieved this. It's again, it's an achievement. Like, having achievements you can figure out, then it's the most important things. Because all of the time, I mean, I meet people that say, oh, I would like to learn this language. And what for? Oh, because I like the language. Well, it's not gonna take you anywhere. It's like you need to have some goal behind. It's the same thing with any. I want to learn C++. What for? Right. I don't know. Well,
that's why I have it. That's why I don't speak any other languages, because I can't find anything that would excite me enough to do it. I know you guys both like to travel. I just like to stay in Wisconsin. Everybody here speaks English. Yeah, so that's all I speak. Kind of. We speak American.
Yeah, exactly. No, but you know what? Edoardo makes a great point, because that's where I think a lot of people stumble. Like on the practical side, if you take everything Edoardo said, you will do great, because most people. The other thing is most people have like Edoardo pointed out, like an abstract goal. We want to be the best metal band ever. Like, okay,
good luck.
Best compared to what? You know, according to whom? It's just not something that you can really quantify. But you can quantify something like, oh, now I know 2 AC/DC songs, or now I know 1 more chord. And when you start getting wins on the board like that, this is going to go into what I think is like the soul of all this goal setting stuff, and it's a feeling of accomplishment and a feeling of competence. And now you're not as afraid to take risks, because the risks aren't complete stabs in the dark. They're educated guesses about certain things. So it's like, you know, I think this is particularly true. It's probably true for really any goal, but, you know, we've mostly talked about goals that are oriented around, you know, a passion of some sort. Like, you don't necessarily need to know any other languages or any instrument, or you don't necessarily need to exercise. I mean, these are all things you should do. And I think in the case of exercise, there's a better case that it more is a must, but there are plenty of reasons not to do these things. It's not the same thing as not having a job. It's not the same thing as, you know, not having a place to live. Like, these are things that might be goals or connected to them, connected to a goal that may not be something that you're very passionate about, but it is a necessity. But if it's something you are passionate about, you've got to get little wins on the board. So, you know, Edoardo and I could probably tell all sorts of stories about that kind of a win with like language learning. You know, like the first time you order something in a new language, or the first time you have a conversation, or you get a girl's number or something like that. Like, all these things are exciting. And the same thing goes with, you know, learning an instrument. I think at the lowest levels, you have to just learn how to enjoy and not put a lot of expectations or pressure on yourself to achieve something. It's good to have short-term goals, like by the end of the week, I want to know half of this AC/DC song on the guitar, or, you know, I want to learn X, Y, and Z by the end of the week, or by the end of the day. You got something short-term that you can focus on, and then you kind of keep track of these. The progression that you get through like complete novice to somebody who's doing a creditable job at something, and you know, you'll do great. And like Edoardo says, you have to have a reason too. Like, someone's like, you know, why do you want to play drums? I don't know, I think it's cool. Versus I'm trying to impress a girl. I guess that's an extrinsic example. Or I always felt like I wanted to do it in orchestra in school, and I wimped out, and now I want to make up for lost time. Okay, it's a little more intrinsic, but it's something that you can actually connect with. And so you have to have an answer to why.
You know, it's funny you brought up orchestra. So I was in my high school orchestra, and for electric guitar. So like, they made an exception for me. And I made the lead violinist really angry on accident, because I won like the big orchestra award for the year, because we covered a Queen song, which we only did because I was in orchestra and I played Brian May's solo. And like, I didn't want this stupid thing. Like, I just took the class because it was, I'll do orchestra. That'll just be easy. Because like, most of the time it was just me sitting in the back, just like noodling on the guitar, doing my own thing, because I had no parts, right? So it was like dumb that I was even there. And then I won the big award, which was wildly inappropriate, because like, other people like are depending on scholarships for this thing, and I just learned some like cheesy Queen solo. So it just goes to show, school's a joke, right? Yeah. Anyway,
you know, I could understand why the violinist would be mad if it was like you played Paganini, and you're like, oh, he did a better job on guitar than that guy did on violin. Like, that would be a real slap in the face. But you know, Queen is on guitar, so he should have been a little bit more congratulatory.
I mean, it's a joke because like the first chair violin player, she was an incredible player. She worked really hard to nail her parts, and like I had one cheesy Queen solo, right? But what's the lesson there? Why did I win? Because it was different, right? It was it's a guitarist, and but like I totally didn't deserve it. But the things I wanted to win at, like the Battle of the Bands, I never won, right? Because I was too focused on being the hyper. So like where the specialist should have won, they lost, right? And where I should have been a generalist, I was a specialist, and I lost. So just one of those sick ironies of life, right?
Should have gotten a violinist to do the Battle of the Bands, man. She might have gotten her scholarship.
Yeah, no, honestly, like if we would have had a violinist in the band, we probably would have gotten more attention and people would have dug it, right? So anyway, hindsight. Learn AC/DC songs. I guess that's the lesson if you want to become a music. Bottom line. Teach you some good rhythms, some good syncopation, right? Edoardo, before we go, anything coming up with Nanowar going on? Got any shows coming up for our fans?
We do, but things are changing rapidly with the COVID situation at the moment. So technically next week we are supposed to leave for our Italian tour. It's going to be like a 7 gigs tour in 2 weeks. I mean, we're waiting for the government to grant us permission. Like as far as I'm concerned, I already
the overlords.
I already talked to our agents and I said, I mean, we should do this regardless. Like someone has to say no at some point, because
indeed,
otherwise just like you just sit down and say whatever they tell you all the time, and it's not that they want to be like a rock and roll label, but it just doesn't make any sense.
Well, I mean, this is the joke, right? I mean, like you see, like Rage Against the Machine just raging with the machine now, right?
Rage
it's like
anyone.
Right, like regardless of what you think about these interventions, which are as dumb as it gets scientifically, as Edoardo and I and Alex have talked about a number of times, like you guys were supposed to be against the man, and like now you're the man's just poodle, right? It's a joke.
It's incredible. I mean, there's just so much lack of resistance to these things. Like no one really wants to expose himself, and like no one wants to speak out. And I know that people, of course, everyone, they are taking the livings of millions of people everywhere in Europe that rely on this kind of job, and they just rely now from they depend on the government to tell them whether you can work tomorrow or not, and it's completely, it doesn't make any sense. Like it didn't make sense last year for me, but now even with the vaccines and everything, like it doesn't make, because it doesn't make sense. Now when we get the vaccine, we got the vaccine, that's it, end of story.
Now should be the the time to open your eyes and realize that it's not going to change, because they said once this happens, then you'll get that, and they haven't. Nothing's changed.
It's not happening, and now there are people saying, but maybe if we just get the first shot. I mean, no, they lied when they said it's gonna be 2 shots and that's it, because it wasn't it. It took like 2 months to reopen, more or less. After the 3 months actually in Italy since they started getting the vaccine. I mean, long story short, we hope we're gonna perform at least for some of these shows.
I hope so as well, my friend.
I would play regardless. That's what I told, but I'm not sure like the whole owners and the promoters and the agents want to like risk anything from this point of view. But
yeah, people are such cowards when it comes to all this stuff. Yeah, but
it is.
If you need a merch guy, let me know.
We need a punch guy, actually. I think for
done. I'm on the next flight over to Rome.
It's gonna be nasty. I don't know. It's and the thing is that for the moment, for example, we all know that something's gonna happen, because the government is say, cases are rising and something's going to happen, and we are all pretending nothing is going to happen. So I'm talking to the agent. I'm saying, okay, look, please, like we should have some kind of plan B, like talk to the other, people in the field, and let's try to organize something all together, like some kind of, because the thing is, I don't want to stand up alone, right? If it's just me, then it won't make any difference. But if it's us and then other tens of thousands of bands and music, people that work in the music business all across the country.
There needs to be coordination, absolutely, right? And
it's not that we don't have it, because there's people that they definitely people that are in the place that could coordinate this, don't want to take the risk.
So I'm not in the music industry, but like, the guy who does the vocals for my things, Antifa Joe, I call him Antifa Joe for reasons we don't have to get into right now. But like he fled California, right? Because they just killed his career, right? Made it impossible. And it's like, and he's obviously not the only musician this has happened to, right? So like, I've been this kind of, good for me because it makes it easier for him to record my stuff, right? Because he's not out gigging at all. But I feel really like, musicians have been crushed. So like, what surprises me is like, where are the musicians here, right? Because like, like for me and Alex, like I'm online, so I have to be honest, like it hasn't been that bad for me. I mean, I hate it because it's stupid and evil what they're doing and all the lies. So happy to fight it. But like economically, I'm fine, thankfully, right? But what about the people that are getting crushed, and like the musicians especially? What's like the general sentiments? Not to drag this conversation on too long, but I imagine like
people
you can't be the only one who feels this way, Edoardo.
Oh no, but we can. I mean, it's a completely different conversation. Maybe next time we can talk about this because. For me, like as I said, I don't understand how can musicians can just sit down and take it, and that's what they're doing. They just take it.
Yeah. Well, know who isn't? Dave Mustaine of Megadeth isn't. I saw him.
Oh, he said something. Yes.
I saw him get up.
Yes. I mean, again, that's like. I read the news. Then it was on on this Loudwire and all this metal. Magazines, and they say, "Oh, it's pretty like some kind of weirdo, anti-science weirdo." So I don't know. Like, they want to be again. I think it's pretty much the same thing everywhere. There's you get these anti-vaxxers that most of the times they're really weirdos, and I mean, I cannot dispute that. Initially, like if you think.
Right, it's just a rhetorical play, though, of guilty by association, right? The rhetorical ploy is to take the reasonable critic and just label them by the thing that everyone associates with a lunatic, right? It's the cheapest tactic.
It's the cheapest. I know. That's what they did to me a lot of times when I went into discussions. Like, oh, do you really want to be on the side of like these guys, or you want to be on the side with these other guys? Like,
I want to be on the side of truth, friend. That's it, right?
It's the same thing I said all the time. I mean, I don't care. I mean, I've been pretty much outspoken about this from the very beginning. Since when I realized it didn't. Like, I took my time to study the things and understand what's like the science behind it. As soon as I realized that like there's no way this thing makes sense, then I spoke. That's something I would expect it from other people in the field. Just not because of science, but because you're letting people destroy your career and your livelihood. And
right.
Again,
yeah.
So that said, we hope we'll be able to play in the next weeks and whatever. I'll keep you updated.
Yeah. Well, thanks for tuning in, guys. This has been thank you both for indulging me. I don't get to talk about music is a huge passion of mine, so I actually don't get to talk about it that much. So this was a very just self-indulgent episode, and I appreciate you guys coming on and sharing your thoughts. Always good. Alex, anything you want to say before we close out?
No, thank you for having me on. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, we'll do this again, and hopefully people listening got some tips for just being a good generalist, building skills and whatnot. So we'll catch you guys on the next broadcast. Peace.